ago. The move will free up vital storage space. There's strong opposition from locals and the fishing industry. Tokyo says the water will be diluted. Officials from countries that are signatories to the 2015 Iran nuclear deal have met again in Vienna to assess any progress in trying to get the agreement back on track. Russia's ambassador to international organizations in the Austrian capital said the participants noted with satisfaction the initial progress made this week. Mikhail Ilyanov said another meeting would be held next week to maintain positive momentum. New German commerce figures show a continued sharp contraction in trade with Britain following the end of the post-Brexit transition period. German exports to the UK this February dropped by 12.2% compared with the same month last year. Imports from Britain for the same period fell even more sharply, 26.9%. About 16,000 people on the Caribbean island of St. Vincent have been ordered to leave their homes because the La Soufrière volcano is at risk of erupting. The authorities said there was a substantial prospect of disaster. Simon Ponsford reports.
The volcano's been quiet since its last eruption in 1979, but now it's been spitting steam and scientists said they could see magma moving towards its surface. Residents were told to watch out for the glowing, fiery appearance of its lava dome when it was dark. The people forced to flee the north of the island will be given temporary homes on cruise ships and in safer parts of St. Vincent. The volcano's biggest eruption was in 1902, when it killed more than 1,000 people.
BBC News.
Hello, you listen. 天天用心听，听见台北的声音。FM 93.1，幸福永远属于你。
公民总主笔，
方恩格时间。
谁当家？
谁当家？你当家？
谁当家？谁当家？
谁当家？
当家？我当
家？
你当家？我当家？
我当家？
到底谁当家？你来当家。
Welcome to Residence Messenger on Taipei Broadcasting Station. I'm your host, Ross Darrell Feingold. Our special guest today is Tim Ferry. Fa Timu in Chinese. It almost sounds like something related to France. It's Fa, right? But Tim is a longtime foreign resident, is a journalist or a writer, and what makes Tim such an interesting member of the community in Taipei is he's also an oil man. He actually went and worked in the oil fields in the United States, gave up on his wonderful life in Taipei for a while to go work in the oil fields. We'll talk about that shortly, Tim. But first, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where in the United States are you from?
Hey, Ross, how are you? I'm from New Jersey. We're kind of from similar parts of the world, right?
Yeah, I'm from New York City area, but as many of our listeners probably know, those of us from New York, we kind of look down on New Jersey.
Exactly. Bridge and tunnel, right?
Yeah.
So, so I'm from the suburbs of New York and New Jersey, and I went to Purchase College, SUNY, which is in Westchester.
Yeah, not far from New York City, actually.
Right,
quite close. Now, what our listeners may not know is that Purchase, this town in north of New York City where you went to university, it's actually one of the wealthiest zip codes in the United States. Why is Purchase so famous for rich people?
Honestly, I have no idea, but I do know that the school is based on an old horse breeding farm. Mm-hmm. So it's a beautiful school. The campus is absolutely gorgeous. I think it was something like 4,000 acres, and most of it old, like pasture lands and stuff like that. So it was a beautiful school. So, and absolutely, the neighborhood is quite wealthy.
Yeah, actually, a lot of large corporations have their headquarters.
PepsiCo,
yes, is headquartered in Purchase.
I actually worked for a spring on the grounds crew at PepsiCo.
Does the factory area or the headquarters area does it have an odor of Pepsi?
No,
if people go to Hershey in Pennsylvania, the town where Hershey chocolate is made, Hershey actually the whole town smells like chocolate.
Not Pepsi.
No, Purchase didn't smell like Pepsi.
I don't think they have any facilities there. It's just corporate.
Mm-hmm.
It's just corporate. But they do have that big art park Have you a sculpture garden? It's fantastic. I think it's like one of the biggest top sculpture gardens in the country.
Yeah,
Something
are
like
the sculptures shaped like Pepsi bottles?
Nothing about Pepsi. No. They get away from that. I think at that time they even owned like KFC or something like that. Anyway, I don't know. Big company. Other than sneaking onto the grounds, as we would, other than that and climbing those sculptures, I really have no knowledge of it.
Yeah, so it sounds like you had some wild times
Sure.
in university. So, in addition to working on the landscape around there, one of your other interesting jobs in your career is you worked as a New York City taxi driver.
I was when I was in college. A buddy of mine, he was driving. We were actually, what it was is we were driving in Lower Westchester, and our coverage area was Lower Westchester and the Bronx. So I wasn't like a yellow cab in New York City. All right, so it was a car service, but it was pretty wild.
And of course, this is long before Uber.
Yes,
long before apps.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And also. I hope we can talk about this on live radio. It was during the biggest wave of violent crime the U.S. has actually ever experienced, 1993.
This is kind of like the crack era.
It was the crack era. It was
and you're driving a taxi in the Bronx.
And I was driving a taxi. And I was doing the 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift. So it was pretty full on.
Now, did you ever say to a passenger one of those famous taxi lines? And I'm thinking of Robert De Niro. Did you ever say to somebody, "You're talking to me"?
Actually, you know what? I can get along with people, and I had very, very few really confrontational rides. Very few, even though I had a lot of really interesting characters in my car. Yeah. But I got along with everybody.
Can you share with us some interesting characters that you drove in your taxi in New York City?
Well, it's sadly the negative ones kind of come up first, right? You know what I mean?
Well, remember, we're on live radio.
I know. I did. Let's see. Well, I got pretty much, quite honestly, from about 11 p.m. until about 4 a.m. It was pretty much nonstop crack, nonstop. It was like I was going from the projects to the hotels to wherever, just in this area, and it was pretty nonstop. So, but. You would think that would be a dangerous situation for me. But in fact, it was, oddly enough, I wasn't really in any danger because everybody knew that the entire ecosystem depended on the taxi driver. So nobody messed with the taxi driver. So it was really weird. I was in really crazy situations, and I was pretty much untouchable. So there was that. However, there was, one guy who was actually known to the taxi company. Basically, it was a taxi company owned by, you'd call them the disorganized crime. It was like where the mafia sent their losers to manage this crew, you know what I mean? And they knew this one guy, and this guy was a crack addict. He was also a Golden Gloves boxer. He was also completely out of his mind. And I got out of that scrape. I got him out of my car finally, and I told him, he's not getting back in my car again. And the next time I saw him, the guys they're saying, they sent me to pick this guy. So it was, and I was like, no, I don't see him. And they're like, what are you talking about? He's right there. I'm like, don't see him. Like, he's looking right at you. I'm like, I don't see him, man. And they said, all right, bring that car back in. You're off the road. And I'm like, okay, fine. I drove in. About a minute later, they're like, sent me on another call. They couldn't lose the driver, right? But they could lose him. So that was about it.
Yeah. Did you ever get into more dangerous situations? So, like you heard gunfire, or the police stopped you and searched the passenger in the car.
I don't know if we can get into it. Man,
well, you had some contraband yourself.
No. It was. I had people. I got pulled over. People getting taken out of my car, the car ripped apart, people getting beaten, really beaten on the side of the Bruckner Highway in the middle of a snowstorm, and then left there without their coats while I was sent on my way. That happened at least a few times. So.
Yeah, so what was the incentive to do this job? The good tips?
It was money. And also, I mean, you'll probably see a pattern. It was pretty exciting, I have to say. I would get home some nights, and I would just be like, what just happened? I just couldn't believe it. I'd start like even shaking a little. I was just like, wow, it was just full on. And but it was actually, believe it or not, we're talking 1993. In 4 nights, I only worked 4 nights a week, and I was making about $500-600 cash. So yeah, it was pretty good money for a 20-year-old guy, you know. That was,
yeah, well, that's called hazard pay, right?
Exactly.
Because it's
exactly.
dangerous. And then
sure.
because you like adventure and apparently you like hazards, Tim, you also worked in Alaska as a commercial fisherman. Were you looking for some peace and quiet after driving the taxi?
No. I was looking for more action, more fun. Yeah, and that was, going to Alaska was a long-standing dream, right? I guess I kind of grew up during the era when Alaska's always big news, right? But it was during the pipeline era, and National Geographic. I used to read that a lot, and so I always dreamed of going to Alaska and working on a fishing boat, and so when I finally got up there, I actually kind of thought the fishing thing was not that big anymore, and I didn't actually initially pursue that. But then I did get an opportunity, and I spent about 5 seasons up there, working on working on salmon and cod boats. Cod boats are the same boats as crab boats, but you make a lot less money. And basically,
Is the work differently though for the different types of fish? For those of us who aren't familiar.
Salmon boats are different. Salmon boats are a totally different industry, right? Cod and crab, basically crab boats. They all use these big cages. They call them pots, and those things use the same tackle for the crab and for the cod. The difference being that king crab at that time was going for about $7 a pound wholesale. So the fishermen were getting $7 a pound. Cod went for about 20 cents. So you're doing the exact same work for the same amount of hours and making a fraction of what you would. But the thing is that these are big boats. They got to make money all the time. And the king crab season is like a week. All right. The crab season is only itself about 3 months. So the rest of the year, they got to do something. They got to be making money. And the way you get on a crab boat is to get on a cod boat first. And but I saw the boat I was on. I saw what the guy was doing, and I was like, okay, I couldn't go out to Dutch Harbor with this guy. And I later on caught up with the same guys on the crew I was on with the cod boat, and it turns out that boat I had been on was seized by the Coast Guard on the high seas for non-payment of his mortgage or whatever, and I mean, basically, they arrested the whole crew. It was really kind of amazing. So I'm glad I got off that boat. But the salmon fishing made me quite a bit of money. Yeah.
What kind of people do you encounter out there? Were people just from the lower U.S. states like you were, looking for some adventure? Mostly.
Yup, exactly. It was, that's why I really loved it. I really enjoyed it because, Alaska attracts people who just like me, were always dreaming of going there. And, when they get there, they've realized it, they've achieved it, and they're full of life, they're excited, they're looking to make money, they're looking for adventure, and so it was great people. So I enjoyed myself a lot up there. It was a great, just a lot of great people. Now the people in Alaska themselves are kind of just like everywhere else, more or less. You know what I mean? They're nothing particularly special. But the transplants who went up there are really exciting people. So,
did you ever see any Taiwanese fishing boats out there? Taiwan is a big fishing fleet.
No. That's interesting. There was at the time, the Coast Guard had seized a Chinese boat. But you know what? It might have been Taiwanese. They wouldn't have known the difference probably back then, right? And I remember there was some kind of a call for anybody who knew any Chinese because they had this boat and no one knew how to operate it because everything was in Chinese. I know that. I do remember that. And of course, the drift net fishing, I'm sure you've heard of that, where these kilometer-long drift nets that are used notoriously by Chinese fishermen, could be also Taiwanese, I don't know. But anyway, I remember that was a big issue. But Yeah, other than that, no, there wasn't really. Although, the canneries.
Yeah,
were,
the Taiwan government or the Kuomintang invested in a cannery in Alaska in the 90s.
Okay, I can believe that. The canneries themselves were staffed primarily by Filipinos. So there was a lot of Asian people there, for sure, definitely. Let's see, I do remember Evergreen. I do remember seeing Evergreen ships up there quite a bit, and I was really shocked when I got to Taiwan and I saw Evergreen's offices, and I'm like, "Wow, an Alaskan shipper has an office in Taiwan." I was very surprised by that.
And a lot of travelers to especially to the East Coast of the United States from Taiwan would be familiar with that stopover in Anchorage.
Yeah, exactly.
So maybe you saw some China Airlines planes flying over that as well.
In fact, when I came to Taiwan, I flew in on a China Air flight, and one of the great things about flying out of Alaska is that because so many people change planes there's often empty seats in business or first class, and the ladies at the airport were really kind, and I often flew out of Alaska. I often flew business class or first class, and so when I came to Taiwan, I came first class, and boy, I didn't want that flight to land, man. That was great.
Yeah, growing up in New Jersey and working in Alaska, were you familiar with Taiwan? What did you know about Taiwan before you came here?
That's interesting. I knew the same thing that you did, and probably everyone in our generation did, is that stuff was made in Taiwan, and I hate to say it, we all know it was not very high quality. All right, now that's changed obviously a lot, but back then it was an unfortunate fact. Other than that, I had no idea about Taiwan. I had traveled all over Southeast Asia, all over Latin America, and Taiwan was the last place I had on my mind to come and visit.
And yet you stayed.
Yes. Well, you know what? What had happened is that my last time going through Southeast Asia, everybody was talking about Taiwan. And everybody was saying, you got to go teach English in Taiwan. And honestly, my reaction was, that sounds awful. I didn't have any idea to go to Taiwan. But circumstances were what they were. And I was still in Alaska by November, and I didn't have a plan at that time. Things kind of went off the rails a little bit. I didn't have a plan. It was really cold, and I talked to an Australian guy I had met in Hong Kong, and he told me all about Taiwan. I had his email. I emailed him and I said, do they have like roads and electricity and stuff there? I had no idea, right? And he's like, come on out, man. And so I did, and I landed, and I was just stunned. I was just amazed at how developed it was, how beautiful the city was, and yeah, for sure. It's always a surprise. I think even today it's still a surprise to a lot of people at what a beautiful place Taiwan really is.
Yeah, and you do a lot to try and change that perception, because you write about Taiwan, and you've been writing about Taiwan as a journalist, focused on business, the economy. What are some of the challenges that you have as a business journalist in Taiwan?
Well, a lot. I mean, it's always something that everybody has to deal with here. Is that there's just not a lot of awareness, and not a lot of people know really why it's important to pay attention. Now, more and more now they do. I think 2020 was a real watershed for Taiwan in that regard. But yeah, I mean, just gaining interest from publications, especially in the U.S., where really it's even now. I would say it's changing, like in the last couple of months, maybe. But up until then, just getting interest from U.S. publications focused on energy or renewable energy, and getting them interested in what's happening in Taiwan has been just amazingly difficult. Like, you just wouldn't think that this huge, just the amount of money involved, that it would be interesting alone on that regard. And yet, it's been. I think there's a real perception gap there. So I think that's been an issue.
What about for the Taiwanese industry, government? Are corporate leaders eager to talk to journalists, especially foreign journalists? Do they do their part? When you call up companies and say, I'm trying to write a story about your industry, I'd like to interview you. Are corporate leaders in Taiwan open-minded?
I would say, it's, as a foreign journalist here, I would say we actually have more access in a way, because we're more trusted. I'd say there's very low trust in the local media, for better or worse, for right or wrong. I mean, I think there's plenty of really good stuff happening in the local media, but I think there's a lack of trust there. And so I think coming from a foreign publication, from an English language publication, you often do get more access in a way, but then it's also presumed that you're going to be, hewing to the line.
You're going to write something favorable about
Exactly. So there's definitely that. So you do have to encounter that. And when you cross that, it can be difficult in the
kind
sense.
of like the people you drove in the taxi.
Well, you won't get that kind of reaction, not to your face anyway. But for sure, you can get shut out, basically shunned in a way. Yeah.
Writing about Taiwan as a journalist, a business journalist, are there skills that you need that are unique to writing about Taiwan's economy that, for example, somebody writing about Japan's economy wouldn't need? Is the skill set, the approach to writing about Taiwan's economy unique?
That's a really good question, because I've done so much of my work here that I've actually really been curious about that. What is it like to cover the Japanese market? What is it like to cover the Korean market? What are the skill sets? Obviously, you have to approach your subjects here with a lot of humor, with a lot of, to be humble, and to be gracious, But people here, obviously, as we all know, are very, they're very kind to foreigners here. And so you start from you have a pretty good starting point in any given exchange. So there's that. And so I would say the basic skill set is don't squander that. Mm-hmm. Keep that good faith, keep that good feeling.
Keep up that credibility,
exactly.
the guanxi, the
sure.
relationships.
For sure.
You as you mentioned, you do a lot of writing about Taiwan's energy mix and the use of renewables. What's something the Taiwanese public, not only the foreign public that you sometimes write about, but what's something that the Taiwan public doesn't know about Taiwan's use of energy?
Wow. Well, there's, that's kind of hard to say what is generally not known and what is, because, the thing is I cover it so much that it's kind of hard for me to even imagine what people don't know. I would say there's some very compelling issues that should be addressed. I do think that the current situation with energy supply going forward in the next couple of years is going to be quite trying, and that Taiwan may face some serious issues regarding power supply starting potentially this summer, and it won't let up. It won't let up for at least a few years until that the renewables really catch up. And until the natural gas infrastructure really catches up, there's going to be a pretty serious crisis here. And I do think that people need to be more aware of it. And I think that the options people should have a clear idea of what are the options.
Do consumers waste energy? Or do you, especially because you write about it, when you visit friends' homes, do you tell them to turn the lights off?
You know why I don't? I don't, because the consumer demand for power, the actual consumer's impact, the general household consumer impact is not very high. Really, 50% of the power is industrial and the power generation itself, right? And then somewhere around 30% is commercial. So really, the commercial section there's a huge amount of power wasted. You can see it, right? We all know, we all have the experience of walking down the sidewalk and having doors that are wide open to the sidewalk and blasting out cold air, right? That's something, you see that less often now, but that's definitely an issue. But the industrial sector is the main consumer of power in Taiwan. So really, I don't know. Turning off the lights, that'll help. Of course, every bit helps, but it's not going to have that much of an impact.
I'll put you on the spot, given your expertise. When it's hazy in parts of Taiwan, people used to say that that's all coming from China, all that dirty air. But is a lot of the dirty air we have here in Taiwan really from local source and from coal?
It's obviously there's probably some amount coming from China, but there's no way that Taiwan can avoid that. However, in somewhere like Taichung, I think the coal-fired power is almost certainly a major factor, right? That is, and that the air quality down there is horrible. But let's not forget that it's this amazing statistic that cooking, that frying oil actually contributes more PM 2.5 to the environment than coal-fired power. That's according to the EPA statistics, which is just a stunning statistic, right? And then you've got the motor scooters. I mean, there's a lot of sources of that pollution, particularly the PM 2.5 and the PM 10, that is not necessarily coal-fired power. Coal-fired power gets a lot of the blame for it, but it's not all that. It's also just lifestyles.
Well, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about Taiwan's energy mix, and then we'll talk about Tim's career in the oil fields. You're listening to Residence Messenger on Taipei Broadcasting Station.
如有长照服务需求、长照特别扣除额问题，请拨打1966长照专线，5分钟内通话免付费。 一通电话让长期照顾管理专员协助申请长期照顾服务及解答长期照顾特别扣除额相关问题。以上内容由台北市政府卫生局提供。
爸爸应酬不开车，黄色嘟嘟安全多。应酬喝酒不过量，安全回家最上道。爸爸要平安回家哦。
喝酒不开车，开车不喝酒哦。让我们一起尊重生命，拥抱亲情。
我是疾管署防疫师陈婉清。防疫期间，如果您是正在居家隔离或检疫的民众，请留在家中或隔离检疫场所，不可随意外出。若您在隔离检疫期间出现发烧、嗅味觉异常、腹泻、呼吸道症状或身体不适，请佩戴口罩，联系卫生局或1922，并依指示就医，不可自行搭乘大众运输。如果您有洗牙、健检等非紧急医疗需求，请先暂缓延后。
有政府，请安心。资讯由疾管署提供。
家己电台吼，家己主持咧。大家好，我是郭文铁，我伫台北广播电台。
谁当家？
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 你当家？
谁当家？谁当家？
谁当家？
谁当家？我当
家。
你当家？我当家。
我当家。
到底谁当家？你来当家。
Welcome back to Residence Messenger. Our guest today is journalist and energy expert, oil field worker, Tim Ferry. Fatimu. Tim, before the break, we were talking a little bit about pollution, Taiwan's energy mix. What do you see for the future of nuclear? Are we still going to have nuclear power in Taiwan 3, 4, or 5 years from now?
That's a pretty good question.
It's the radioactive question.
Yeah, it certainly is. I would say, I hate to say that, I don't want to disappoint my friends in the industry. However, I would say it doesn't look very likely at all, quite honestly. There's the political weight pushing against the nuclear sector is impacting the technical aspects of it. And it's basically making it's more or less making nuclear power impossible here.
So is wind and solar going to make up what's lost from the decommissioning of the nuclear power plants?
That is, wind and solar will definitely play a role. Solar in particular is already helping Taiwan to meet its peak demand, which is during those really hot days when the power demand is really, really high. And it's also when solar is generating at a very high level. So solar is very instrumental in that regard, for sure. Offshore wind will be, offshore wind has a different pattern. It tends to generate, the winds are strongest in the winter, and the strongest at night, which are both times when power demand is pretty low, and Taiwan is generally on a base load. So that's going to be a little bit of a different scenario. It's not going to be dealing with the peak. It's going to be impacting Taiwan's base load more like. But since Taiwan is replacing a lot of its base load power is the power that's always on, and that's usually your cheaper power, which would be nuclear or coal. Primarily, right? And so Taiwan is obviously getting rid of its nuclear power, which is about 12% of generation, getting rid of about another 6% of coal-fired. It's reducing its coal-fired. So wind will be generating and probably taking some of that role. And what mostly, though, what's going to have the biggest impact is the natural gas. Natural gas will definitely have the biggest impact.
And what's the role of journalists in all of this, right? When we read stuff about the ongoing debate about nuclear referendums, is there some bias by journalists who write about these issues for what their preferred energy source is, or journalists doing a good job educating the public or in Taiwan?
You know, it's such a hot button topic, particularly nuclear. However, I do think that there is a line, a party line on each side of this issue, and anything that deviates from that party line is not really welcome by its particular narrative, and that I feel is disappointing. And I do think, because I do believe that politicizing an issue such as energy production is very dangerous, because it's leading to a situation where Taiwan may face a situation where it won't have enough power to generate, to keep its economy, to keep its lifestyle going, and that's quite risky. And I think that that there should be a lot less politics involved and a lot more pragmatism in facing issues that are not just about energy security, but also about greenhouse gas reduction, which is certainly an important issue. So I think there should be a more pragmatic approach, and I think it's up to journalists to advocate for that, for those kind of, for the reality of what Taiwan's energy situation is.
Now, well, you certainly practice what you preach as far as journalists and pragmatic approach, because to further your understanding of the energy industry, you went to work in the oil fields of North Dakota. You gave up your nice life in Taiwan, in Taipei for a while, and you went to North Dakota.
That's right. I did. I thought, one thing that has always, I think it's kind of like an old saying that, journalists, they barely see the flames and they never feel the heat, but they're going to tell you all about the fire, right? That kind of thing. That journalists, they talk a lot, but they don't really know, and they don't really have that direct experience. And I felt that what was happening in the U.S. oil sector is just monumental, and it's kind of ending right now, but it was for a while there. It was upending the world of global petroleum, and I felt that by going there and actually working in the sector, that I would gain a very vital and pretty rare perspective for a journalist on what it's like. How do these operations actually work? What it's like for the workers out there? How does this? What's the safety culture there? What's the environmental culture there? What is how do they take care of their workers? How are they making money? Right? And I felt that by working there, I would gain a lot of insight into that industry.
And how do you explain, in a couple of sentences or less, what fracking is?
Oh, what fracking is? Oh, fracking is actually, it's called production enhancement. So what that means is that the well is already there. Okay, it already exists, but the owner of that oil well has experienced that the oil well is just not producing anymore. Maybe it's not producing at all, or maybe it's just declining. So what fracking does is they basically send down these, they call them guns. They're these metal, I guess you call them like a plug or something, and within those plugs are explosives, and it's sent deep down into the well, and it just blows up the rock around the well, and then and then what follows that is a mixture of water and sand and certain chemicals that go there to make sure that those fissures that are opened up in the rock remain open. And then basically it's done. It takes a while to do that, right? To do the whole well, and then from then the well will start producing again, because basically you're just allowing that oil that's trapped in the rock to then start to flow back into the well.
And what kind of job responsibilities did you have out there?
Okay, I was in the ground. I made it into ground, and that was my where I hope to make it. And ground, what we do is we maintain the pumps. What it is you've got about 12 of these 1,200 horsepower pumps that are hooked up to tractor trailers, and they all pump water from these big tanks through a everything's gigantic. I shouldn't just keep saying big because everything's big, right? There's this manifold, and that manifold is connected to the well, and it pumps it in. So basically what we did was we maintained the connection of that manifold to the well and the trucks, and basically the pumps on the trucks. And so that was, it's pretty much, I have to say, the toughest job out there, and it's the job that the new guys get, right? Because the guys who've been there for a while, they work in the machines themselves, and they're less exposed to the elements, that kind of stuff. But yeah.
So no experience was necessary.
No,
they'll just start you on the toughest job out.
Well, they don't actually start you there. You actually kind of have to work your way there. I started in sand, which is basically useless. You have to direct trucks who are dropping off big containers of sand, and that's basically where you start off. Where they're more or less telling you have very little purpose here, and if you don't start showing some degree of aptitude, you're not going to last long, okay? Then you go, if you make it out of sand for the first few weeks, then they move into chems, the chemical section. So I did that for a few weeks as well, and that kind of feels like you've got some responsibility, and it's dirty, really nasty. You're dealing with hydrochloric acid, big tankers full of that, and stinky, dangerous. Yeah, that's where the new guys go first, is the chems, and then if you prove you're able to do pump maintenance, that's the big thing. That's basically what a grounds guy does. And then you can move on to ground. And then from ground, then you get to kind of fill in, and you can potentially move into the operations side where you're operating some of the trucks, that kind of thing. But so ground isn't the first step, but yeah, it's pretty low.
Did you tell people you were from Taipei?
You know, I kind of did.
What kind of reaction did that get?
Basically blank looks, I mean, I tell people I was from New Jersey, and that got a lot of reaction.
Well, New Jersey historically has had a oil refining and chemical industry.
Well, that wasn't the reason for the reaction, though. I mean, it was, remember, this is North Dakota, all right? So people would tell me about their neighbor's cousin who went to New Jersey once, that kind of thing. I mean, they had very little exposure. So Taiwan, it was just basically, it was kind of funny if I mentioned Taiwan, it was like people it didn't react at all. It was couldn't even really get their heads around that. However, there was a fair amount of immigrants in the industry, primarily from Africa, which was kind of unexpected anyway. And of course, obviously, immigrants by and large have a kind of a broader worldview. And so then I could actually talk about Taiwan with them, and they have some kind of reaction, really. But local Americans, not too much. Yeah.
You're going to write a book about this experience.
Yep.
Yeah. What are you going to call the book?
Well, tentatively, I'm going to call it Boom and Bust in the Bakken. Why that? Well, because the Bakken, that's the area of western North Dakota where the oil fields are, the Bakken oil fields. Boom and bust because it's a tough industry. It's a tough industry, and it was booming for a while, and then it kind of busted me. So that's the book is going to be that story, that experience. So.
Just like your taxi driving and fisherman experiences, is there going to be some really funny or unique stories that we're going to see in the book?
For sure. I mean, it's an industry filled with characters, obviously, right? I mean, these are kind of first off, it's North Dakota. Okay, so North Dakota is literally, in Celsius terms, it literally in a year you can go from minus 46 to plus 46 in a year. It's actually is a little fun fact for you that North Dakota has the widest temperature ranges of anywhere on the planet. So it's just an extreme environment right there. There's almost hardly anybody there, and there's a lot of labor intensive work. So they just need people. So pretty much, they'll hire you. If you can make it out there, you'll get a job, right? And one of the funny experiences I had was filling out a job application, and when I handed it to the person behind the counter, and they looked at it and they said, "What? No felony convictions?" And I was like, I didn't know it was an asset, But that's pretty much if you got felony convictions, you pretty much unemployable in most other places. You can go to North Dakota and get a job, right? You know, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's filled with characters. There's a lot of my coworkers were actually Iraq war vets. A lot of them Afghanistan, Iraq. A lot of them not just war vets. A lot of them were Marine war vets. So tough people and who've been through some tough times. So yeah, a lot of characters for sure.
Are you going to talk about how much you missed being in Taipei? Are we going to see that in the book?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I did absolutely. You know, and it wasn't just Taipei. I missed my family. You know, I was out there by myself. I didn't want to bring my family over there until we really had understood it. So yeah, and it's kind of the kind of environment that kind of breeds loneliness. It's just like that. It's isolating. Winter is very long. It's extremely cold. It's not a place to casually socialize. You know, people just don't go. There's a bar scene, but it's kind of dangerous. You know, yeah. So it's not. Taipei is so much more just relaxed, so much more easygoing, so much more fun. So yeah, sure. I miss Taiwan.
Years ago, Taiwan engineering companies had a reputation for doing projects like building oil refineries, different parts of the world.
Sure.
And it's also a business Korean engineering companies got into as well. But Taiwan is not known for exporting oil workers recently.
No.
But you became an oil worker export from Taiwan.
Yeah, that was pretty unusual, I have to say. And I think you know, one of the things is that like me being out there didn't really make a lot of sense for people. Like, you know, a young guy going out there, sure, there's young guys coming from all walks of life, right? So that made sense. They're just going out there for an adventure or what have you. And then there's older guys out there too, but most of them have been in the industry for you know, years, right? They're probably from Texas or Louisiana or something like that, right? But for me being out there and you know, people were just like, who is this guy, right? You know, it just didn't make any sense, really, you know. And then I and definitely you'll appreciate this. You know, you talked about the challenges of being a journalist in Taiwan. Well, you know, the challenges of being a journalist in America are maybe even more considerable, and particularly in that industry because it's so controversial. That in my very first night in North Dakota, I was talking to some guys, asking them, you know, what's the deal? How do you get on with the crew? And they asked me what I had done, and I mentioned I worked in Taiwan, and that made no sense. And then I mentioned I made up a job. I told them I was a market researcher because, you know, I do a lot of market research, right? And they're like, what does that even mean, right? And I slipped and I said, it's kind of like a journalist. And boy, that did not go over well at all, right? And I won't go on to where that went, but it did not. And I learned quite quickly, never use the J word up there, right? So that it was tough. It was tough integrating for sure.
Yeah, you think this is something younger Taiwanese might consider doing for some adventure? A lot of Taiwanese, they go to Australia for a working holiday or things like that. Yeah, should young Taiwanese looking for adventure consider going out to the oil fields in North Dakota?
You know what? That's actually in part why I've always been such a big supporter of offshore wind here, because I think it can drive that similar kind of employment. And I do think that for young Taiwanese, I think, definitely get into offshore wind. I think you can have that. You don't have to go all the way to North Dakota for that kind of adventure. I think that what is happening right now in the Taiwan Straits offers just a huge amount of opportunity for you know, being out on the water, for doing that kind of heavy work. You'll have lots of stories to tell. You know, it'll be. I think that the offshore wind sector would supply that same kind of adventure and a lot closer to home.
Tim, if people want to follow your writings about business news, or they want to find out more about your upcoming book, what's the best way to keep on top of Tim Ferry?
Okay, well, I am on LinkedIn, and I'm always showing up in AmCham Topics magazine, the ECCT, Euroview. I'm also showing up there a lot. I've just started a website, but you're going to need to let me get back to you on. I don't remember what the letters are, but just started. It's just starting now. But LinkedIn would be the best way. So.
Okay, and when will the book be out?
The book will be out. I am hoping I'm about halfway through it, but you know the editing process. I'm really looking for early summer. I'm looking for early summer.
Soon.
Yeah, for sure. Because I was keeping notes the whole time I was out there. I mean, a lot of them are going to be kind of, you know, they're not very useful for the book because they're not very fun. They're kind of like a woe is me kind of a stuff. But there is some of the notes are really good. I'm glad I kept them, and I'm back in touch with some of my crewmates and to get some comment from them. So so I'm looking at an early summer. I hope.
Okay, so Boom and Bust in the Backen.
Yep, that's right.
Authored by Taipei-based Tim Ferry will be out this summer. Tim, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you very much, Ross. Appreciate it.
You've been listening to Residence Messenger on Taipei Broadcasting Station. Have a great weekend.